Welcome back. I'm joined now by Jim Carrick, president of Gamble Rogers Music Festival, who is playing a little guitar there of Gamble Rogers. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, let's scooch a little closer. And welcome back to our guest, Bruce Horvitz, who, in addition to writing the book that we just discussed, Justice Pursued, is also the author of a book about Gamble Rogers, and we couldn't resist asking him to join this conversation as well. So thanks for being here this segment as well, Bruce.
I'm glad to stick around and talk about Gamble.
Perfect.
So he's a folk musician who's become a folk legend, both for his inimitable style and his heroic death. Before he died in 1991, Gamble Rogers had a 30-year career as one of the best-known folk musicians in the South, and also a well-known voice to faithful NPR listeners. If you ever attended a Gamble Rogers Folk Festival or possibly had a chance to see Gamble Rogers perform, we'd love to hear from you. Give us a call at 549-2937. Send an email to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org or message us on Facebook or Instagram. Tag us on X at FCC On Air. So I'm going to start with you now, Jim, if I can. When did the festival start, and why was it formed around Gamble Rogers?
Well, when he died in that terrible way, he left us all in mourning for a long, long time in St. Augustine and just created a vacuum. And so when the dust finally settled, that festival was born out of that vacuum.
And so who is Gamble Rogers?
Who is? He was an incredible person as well as being a wonderful musician. Difficult to describe in many ways other than he possessed a certain type of charisma that's very rare. In other words, he could walk into a room and change things simply by being in the room. He didn't necessarily have to play or speak to do that, but people would be drawn to him. I experienced that one other time in my life when I was in the Exit Inn in Nashville one time, and the room changed. You know how you can feel that? You know how the hair goes up on the back of your neck sometimes when you know something's going on? Well, Johnny Cash just simply walked into the room. So he had that same sort of charisma. But looks like people would be drawn to him. They'd want to talk to him, and he was very generous with his time. He was a star with us a long time before he went out in that surf that day.
So let's touch on that. He had a well-lived life and a very tragic death. He was trying to rescue someone. Tell us a little bit about what occurred.
I like to talk more about other days than that one, but yeah, he was there camping with his wife. I had been at his house the day before and helped him actually load the van to get ready for that camping trip. They were down in Flagler Beach, and a little girl came up and was crying out for help for her father who was stuck in the surf. And it was a northeaster. The surf was raging. No one should have been in it to start with. But a little background, Gamble had a childhood affliction that caused his spine to fuse. And he couldn't turn his head. He couldn't barely lift his arms above his head. Yet when he was called upon for help and there was no one else, his honor and conviction would allow him to do nothing else but try. And I'm not sure that I would have, or how many of us would have, but he could not refuse.
I'm very sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
I can see it's still an emotional thing for you.
For all of us, yeah.
Bruce, how did you learn about Gamble Rogers, and what prompted you to want to write a book about him?
Well, we were at Crescent Beach one day, and a gentleman approached me that I had known for some time. He produced a Polaroid photograph from the late 1940s of two babies on a blanket. And he said, do you know who these two people are? And I said, no. He says, that's me and Gamble Rogers. Well, it turned out that this gentleman, Bruce McEwen, who was eventually a Florida state legislator, grew up with Gamble and was Gamble's closest friend. And he started telling me the story, and I went immediately to start researching more about this person. I went to the library, I went to the internet, and I saw that there had been very little written about this interesting man. So one by one, Bruce McEwen, who has since passed away, started introducing me to people like Jim Carrick and others who were in Gamble's circle. And it was clear to me that this was a story that needed to be told. And I'm really glad that we did it, because it really was, people need to know about Gamble. They need to know about his life, his contributions, his music, and the kind of person that he was.
So one of the things that Gamble Rogers was known for was his storytelling with his music, and he created this entire fictional community in Ocklawaha County, which is a place that doesn't exist, and a cast of characters that included Agamemnon Jones and Miss Eula Singletary. But it's hard to talk about Gamble without playing a little bit of his performance to get an idea of really kind of how he carried himself and what his delivery was. So let's hear a little bit of Gamble performing live. Jim Carrick, what is it about Gamble Rogers that was so appealing, that connected with audiences so well?
Well, he would just simply blow you away with his incredible guitar work, and at the same time telling you a story at lightning speed and throwing words at you that you just never heard before. And his timing was impeccable, comedic timing, that is, and because he could tell an old, worn-out joke that we had heard 1,000 times and still split your sides laughing and want to hear it again. So, it was an amazing time.
He's been called Mark Twain with the guitar.
Mm-hmm.
He's performed on The Tonight Show. He was on The Ed Sullivan Show. He was a regular contributor to National Public Radio. So he had quite a public profile, Bruce, before his death.
Yeah, he did. He never really sought the limelight. But one of my favorite Gamble quotes was that somebody once asked him in a radio interview, do you consider yourself a musician, songwriter, a humorist? What do you consider yourself to really be? A humanitarian? And Gamble looked straight at him and said, I ain't nothing but a whiskey salesman. He says, the more I play, the more whiskey they drink. And that was his sort of humble way of kind of defining who he was. One of my other favorite quotes while Jim is here in the book is Jim Carrick, I think, pretty much nailed it when he said that everybody wanted to play guitar like Gamble because he was an amazing guitar player. So he said everybody wanted to play guitar like Gamble, but more than that, everyone wanted to be like Gamble. And that really speaks to the legacy that this man left. He did so many things that people never knew about. Charity things, taking care of people, taking people under his wing. There was never a stranger in Gamble Rogers' life. If you met him the first time, it was like he knew you his whole life. And I had the fortune of writing this book without ever meeting Gamble Rogers or ever seeing Gamble Rogers perform. But based on all the people I met and the interviews that we did and the atmosphere around this man, I really felt like I got to know him in a way that I was really privileged to be able to learn about.
And people obviously very willing to share those stories and their memories.
I could write 3 sequels to the book that I wrote once it came out. Oh, you didn't tell this story. Or, oh, I can give you a story about Gamble. At some point you had to stop, but it could go on and on and on.
Right. Well, I've said this quite a few times, especially recently doing things like this, but and I'll probably say it some more as the festival gets a little closer, but the key thing about our relationship with Gamble was that he, yes, taught us to be better musicians. He was very giving of his time. Sometimes he would teach me things on the guitar over the telephone. He would call from the road, and we'd go back over something we had worked on while he was home. And but more than that, by just our association with him and his example, he taught us to be better human beings.
So the 28th Annual Gamble Rogers Folk Festival is April 12th and 14th at the St. Johns County Fairgrounds. But there are a couple things happening right now. There's some early bird tickets that are on sale right now until December 31st. And there's also a deadline for the youth stage. You're accepting submissions, I believe, until December 22nd.
That's correct. We do have a youth stage. It is now known as the Young Folk Stage, which we like it better. This is put together by our board member, Don Cooper, with help from Tommy Bledsoe and Gamble's daughter, Lolly Rogers. We invite young musicians to apply and come and have a professional experience on stage. It is part of our main mission is to get Gamble's legacy and music out into the community. If I may continue, there's one other part.
Just very briefly.
We do have we have a concert series that ties in with our school workshops where musicians traveling through town, nationally known musicians, go out to St. Augustine High School and actually put on a workshop for the students there.
Well, thank you so much, both of you, for being here. You can find out more information at the Gamble Rogers website about the festival. Bruce Horvitz, thank you for joining us for a second segment. Jim Carrick, thank you so much for being here and playing guitar. Maybe we'll hear a little bit more.